name is Chelsea Lathrop. I'm the Education and Outreach Coordinator for Maine Department of Inland Fisheries and Wildlife. That is a really big mouthful for I teach fishing for a living. And I have the whole state as my jurisdiction. I don't do any law enforcement. My role is just to host outdoor programs and fishing opportunities across the state. And this Exploring Maine's Fishing Opportunities session came from feedback we received from participants who wanted to know more. We do a lot of talking in our sessions, but we don't usually talk about the nuts and bolts or the resources that are available. So this is going to be a lot of talking and showing this evening. But please feel free to use the raise your hand feature or put your question in the chat box as we go along so that we can get those questions answered for you. I have been living in Maine my whole life and fishing since I was born, fly fishing since I was 8, and just starting to dabble in surf casting. So anywhere in between, I have experience there, and I will let Tanya and Laura introduce themselves as well.
Hi, I'm Tanya. I'm the marketing specialist for Maine Department of Inland Fisheries and Wildlife. I will be running the back end of the Zoom today. So if you have any technical issues, you should have got my email, I believe, with the Zoom link. It's tanya.russell@maine.gov. So feel free to reach out if you're having any issues. Um, and we will be recording the Zoom today, and we'll get you a playback in the next week or two once this is finished. And I believe we'll also be putting together an FAQ off of your questions in the chat, just in case we don't get to anything, or if you want to circle back to what you learned here today.
Hi, everyone. I'm Laura Williams. I am a wildlife biologist with Maine Audubon. I focus mostly on birds, but have done wildlife work all over Alaska and Maine, and went to college in Maine. I am here to talk about lead-free fishing tackle and how that helps our loons throughout the state, and fill in any questions that I can help Chelsea with. I also love fishing. I've been fishing since I was a little kid. I live on Mosum Lake in southern Maine. Just was out bass fishing before this, so excited to talk fishing and see what everyone's questions are.
Fabulous. I will warn everybody, my internet seems to be having technical difficulties tonight. So if at any time I drop off, Laura and Tanya are my backups. So they will step in here, but bear with me as I share my screen and we are going to dive in to our resources. All right, can everybody see my screen? Pull this up larger so you can all see it. Fabulous. So the first place we're going to start is on our homepage. So if you haven't been there already today or anytime, our link to our website through Maine Department of Inland Fish and Wildlife is mefishwildlife.com. It'll bring you here. You can also type in the maine.gov/IFNW. Either URL will bring you to our website. You can also just Google MDIFW for our department. Some clarification for folks if you don't know, we have lots of many names that folks will refer to us as. MDIFW, official acronym, Maine Department of Inland Fisheries and Wildlife. There's no the before it, but most folks call us IF&W. That's the biggest reference. Everything, like I said, from the coastline into the mountains. We go to the New Hampshire border, to the Canadian border, and everywhere in between. There's 7 different divisions within our agency. So I work for the Education and Outreach Division, as does Tanya. We're the marketing and kind of outreach for folks. And then we have our law enforcement aspect, the game wardens. They're responsible for search and rescue as well as enforcement. And then we have our biologists who do both our wildlife and fisheries management. There's many of them. The Maine Wildlife Park is part of the education team. We have our licensing and registration. So if you have an ATV, snowmobile, boat, any of those things, dirt bike, that all gets registered through us as well. And then we have an engineering division as well. They're responsible for all the maintenance and upkeep on our properties around the state, as well as helping maintain the boat launches that you have access to across the state as well. So many different facets of the agency that folks may not know about. So here on our website, in case you wanted to learn more and you're really bored, there are 6,000 pages that you can click through on our website. But I'm here tonight to give you kind of which pages I find the most helpful. The first thing, when you scroll down on this homepage, if you haven't subscribed to our emails yet, I highly recommend filling out this keep in touch box. What this does is allow you to tailor your subscription to our emails, and you can find out everything you want to know about fishing only, bird watching. You can learn about our outdoor programs. You can learn about our outdoor partners program. And so there's many different features that you can tailor within that keep in touch. And that's how you're going to be the first to know about all of these workshops, programs, news that we send out that goes to our subscription list first. Bear with me as I scroll. I don't want to make everybody sick, but this homepage has some really useful links if you're just trying to get somewhere quick. Like I said, it has the subscription link down below. You can also shop our online store. There is some law books here. We usually change those out seasonally. And you can purchase your license or register any of your outdoor recreational vehicles right here on this homepage as well. Any questions so far? All right. We're going to dive into the next part of our resources here. So, has everyone heard, or has anyone heard, that we now have a new app? So, on your smartphone, your mobile device, both on Apple and Samsung or Motorola, Microsoft, any other phone, you can, I'm an Apple user, clearly. I don't even know what another type of phone is called. You can download our app, which is a fabulous resource. I love it because you can use it without being on data or cellular service. You can use it in airplane mode. And once that app is downloaded on your phone, you also have all of the law books right there in your pocket. I would highly recommend, this is the point in our presentation where if you don't have the app yet and you would like to download it, you're more than welcome to do so. On the app, once you open it up, you will have a home screen that gives you the opportunity to click under each tab, like hunting, fishing, trapping. We have fish and wildlife, ATV and snowmobile, boating, and you can contact us all through the app. My favorite part, though, is that you can create your own profile and add in Moses IDs. So if you're a mom and dad, you can put your kiddos in there if they're under 18. You can put your registrations in there. Once you get your guide's license, you can put your guide's license in there. It will all be linked to all your holdings that are through IF&W. And each year, an update as we're doing different, the app is a work in progress. So there's different features that are coming as we continue to add to its capability. It's brand new. It rolled out about a year ago. And I have nothing but great things to say about it. It also links some of the resources that we're going to cover tonight in the app. So you have access to them on a mobile device instead of needing a desktop or laptop computer to access them. Any questions about the app or the website so far? I'm going to check the chat here. Let's see. Can you use the app as proof of license? Absolutely. That's one of the coolest new things is you don't have to have your paper license on you anymore. Wardens will accept your license or registration on your phone. Great question. Over here on the left-hand side of the page, we have a bunch of more, this is all underneath our news and events. So we do have a blog where we update blog posts. Some of those are pertain to fishing, but this tab is not quite as exciting to you, except for all the way down at the bottom is the fishing report. So there's a faster and easier way to get to the fishing report. And we're going to do that by going underneath either the fishing and boating tab or the fish and wildlife tab. So I like to click on this fishing and boating. It takes you to the home page where you can access the law books on the website. You can also view other resources such as our stocking report, fishing report, and our bait fish and smelt retailers. So we're kind of in that in-between season between ice fishing and spring fishing. For many of us, it's either a heartache to say goodbye to ice fishing, or you're just super excited to get into spring fishing, whether that be spin casting or fly fishing. Either way, you can follow that stocking report when our hatcheries are going out there. Maine has 6,000 lakes and ponds and 32,000 miles of rivers and streams. We have more coastline than any state in the United States, and that's because we count the islands. But we have some of the best fishing opportunities in the country, and you can see those stocking reports as well as a fishing report. So the difference between the two is we have hatcheries across our state who raise over 1 million fish each year. They are primarily focused on cold water fisheries, and that's part of our management program to stock fish, not only for folks like all of you to go and fish and have opportunity, but we also stock to help supplement wild populations. So our biologists, we have regional fisheries biologists who are doing the field data collection and making the management and law changes each year. And then we have our hatchery staff who are working with our fish and raising those up to partner with our field staff who are putting those out into designated bodies of water they identified. So that is one way that we work in tandem. That stocking report gets updated every time that they put fish out into the wild, and they will tell you how many fish, what species of fish, and what body of water they put. Another thing that's really helpful is this fishing report. So we'll click on the fishing report and go there because this is probably one of my favorite resources that IF&W puts out for anglers in the state. This is put together every month from our regional fisheries biologists. So each of these regions, A through G, have one regional supervisor and 2 to 3 field staff in each location. They're monitoring all the water in that section, and then they provide a synopsis to our marketing and social media team, who then sends it out to all of us. So they're talking about what the fishing is like in that region, where they would recommend going, and tips for fishing in that region for certain species that they know are active. Um, so this is a really great resource for you if you're looking for a place to go. Usually where I start looking. So as the outreach coordinator, my job is to host fishing programs all over the state, and I have never been as far as Fort Kent. So there are some regions of the state that I have never seen, but I do plan programming there. And so I start by going to the fishing report to see what's biting and where, excuse me. And then I start using some other resources here. This is the part where we're going to start showing you so many resources. You may get overwhelmed. Please don't worry. We will send you a link with all of these links in an email. Over here on the left-hand side, I'm going to back up just a little bit. So when I clicked on this fishing and boating tab, it took us to the fishing and boating home. But if you scroll down and go straight to the fishing tab, this will bring you to my favorite page within our website. It gives you all of those fun facts about how much water we have in the state. And then every link that you could possibly want to get started fishing is right here on this page. Forgive me while I take a sip of water. So if you're new to Maine or new to the area, you can get to know the species that live in Maine. So when you are looking at our species, you may notice that we divide them into warm water and cold water species. So those species, we divide them, one, because they don't all fit on one pocket guide for your tackle box, but two, because we divide them based on the habitat you're going to find them. So the difference between warm water and cold water is about 65 degrees Fahrenheit. About 55 to 65 degrees is that little window between the two species. So the overlap. A cold water species are things like your trout and salmonoids. They are native to Maine. They need really cold, deep, well oxygenated water. And you're going to find them primarily under 55, 65 to 55 degrees Fahrenheit. They really need that cold, clean, oxygenated water. When you get above 65 degrees, you're going to find a lot of those warm water species like sunfish, bass, perch, pickerel, etc. And you may find some overlap with the trout living in those water bodies as well, but primarily those zones are going to live in the southern half of our state. So I'm going to toggle over here just for a moment so I can show you a visual. When you look at our state as a whole, we divide it into two zones. So we've got our north zone and our south zone, and we have two different sets of laws. We're not going to jump into laws yet. We're still talking about fish species, so our warm water and our cold water. In that blue south zone here is where you're going to find primarily the overlap of those warm water and cold water species. As you get close to the Bangor line up here, that's when you're going to start to see less bass and sunfish or crappie, black crappie, and you're going to start seeing a lot more trout and salmon species that are native to Maine. Maine is one of the last strongholds of native brook trout in the country. So in the northern part of the state, we're managing for those native brook trout versus in the southern half of our state where we do have invasive non-natives, we're managing for the overall fishing quality of that region. And that's primarily where the majority of our population lives, is in that southern half of the state as well. Questions on species so far? How's the chat looking? I see some more in here.
We don't have questions on species specifically, but we do have a question about if there's a single place to find boat launch sites with parking for trucks and trailers. Do you want to get to that now, or should we wait for later?
We can jump in there and I'll do a little side caveat for that. Let's see where my best link would be. All right, so we'll go under boating and we're going to explore together because I'm not 100% certain. Their answer is yes, there is. So, boating access sites. So just to back up so you can see where I went, I clicked under, hovered over the fishing and boating, went down to boating, and then over here on the left-hand side, it says boating sites. And the in parentheses says that it's going to take us off-site from IF&W's website to now we're on the our boat sites are managed on the forestry, state parks and lands access page, not our website. Don't ask me why. But for that being said, over here again on the left-hand side, you can see public boat launches, boat ramps at state parks, boating resources. You can search through, or you can see the table, and you can also look at it in Google Earth. So this is where all of our information on both sides is. It's not super duper helpful, but it gives you more than not knowing anything at all, in my personal opinion. Take that as you will. It is improvement. Diano is our public access biologist. He's been in that role for about 3, give or take, years, and he has been working to improve our access sites as well as increase the number of public boat launches that we have in the state. And I can tell you this list is totally it's in a lot better shape than it used to be, and it is improving every single day. So if you have further questions, let me know, and I can absolutely push you over to Diano, who would have more answers for that. But as far as is there a list, there's a list of 581 of them for you to go through. And you can always check if you have Facebook. The fishing sites on Facebook have phenomenal resources, and people would be more than happy to send you pictures of what those boat launches look like.
And can you get that information on the app also?
I don't know the answer to that. If you give me 1 second, I can look that up. Water access sites is underneath fishing resources. And if you share your location with the app, as I just did, it will actually pull you up a GIS map and you can enter an address if you want. So, yes, the app is a fantastic resource. It's telling me about two right here in my local area. So, thank you for teaching me something new.
And is there a way to look back at fishing reports, at past fishing reports?
If you contact your local person or myself, absolutely. We will provide you any fisheries data you want to know. Let me see how many we have on the website here. Hmm. That is a great question. I don't know if those in our blog or just on this particular site. I don't know the answer to that. But another way to get the monthly fishing report is to subscribe to our emails, and then you'll get that in an email every month as well. And so you'll have a record of them. But I can certainly get you access if you send me an email to any of those fishing reports.
And can you talk about water rights when accessing posted land?
No, but I will give you what I know. So in the state of Maine, if it is not posted, meaning there is no trespassing, no private property, no purple line, no access by permission only, you may access that land so long as it is not posted otherwise. However, as the agency, we highly recommend checking for landowner relations and asking for permission. You can do that by finding the tax apps, or if you use Onyx or Trout Routes as apps, those will both show you property owners. As far as land access, I'm assuming that you are referring to the ponds greater than 10,000 acres. There's a fancy rule in there. I don't know the answer to that. But again, if you send me that email, I can put you in contact with someone who can answer that question.
And we've made it back to our species. Pikes being invasive, are there good canoe-friendly still water spots to fish for them?
Fabulous. Uh, Sabatis Lake. If you go there, you'll catch some of the biggest pike I've ever seen in my life. Um, I've also heard that there are pike all along the Androscoggin. So something really fascinating and super cool about Maine is that through all of our water sites that were formed back when the glaciers came down over, every body of water is pretty much connected. Not every single one of them, but most of them are connected, whether it be by groundwater, underground reservoirs, on the surface level, streams, brooks, trickles in the springtime. Everything has a way of moving, which is both good and bad, because with that means the pike, if they're here, or any of those non-native species, they can get just as far as any other species. So I do know that they are unfortunately in the Androscoggin. So any body of water that's off from the Androscoggin River, you will likely find pike, primarily in the Sabatis, Lewiston, Auburn, Route 4 Turner area. There is phenomenal pike fishing anywhere you go.
And
So, you go
um,
ahead.
last one for now. Is there a map or reference for bodies of water that allow only fly fishing? And is that on the app?
Thank you for that transition. So we're going to go to my favorite resource. I know I've said favorite a lot. It's fishing. It's hard to pick a favorite, but I do have many. So here again, we're back underneath the fishing tab on our website, and in the middle here where it says know the laws, you can search the fishing law book. But my favorite thing is to go here to this float. Float stands for the Fishing Laws Online Angling Tool. You can access this through the app, which is phenomenal, and you can access it on a desktop computer or a laptop. What you do is you can access it right under the fishing tab in the app. It's called Float. Or if you're on the website, you go here to launch the Maine Fishing Laws online angling tool. It pulls you up a GIS map with layers that have been inputted by a fisheries biologist. So this very first thing that pops up is just telling you about our state of Maine fishing laws. Highly recommend reading it at some point. We will skip that for tonight. We are also going to skip the quick start instructions, but if you want to know more about how this feature works and everything about it, you can even take a tour. That's here on the left-hand side, and it's always there. You can toggle up top here, and because I have no patience and I don't read instructions, we go straight to the search icon. Okay, so when we are fishing, I'm going to try something new here and see if we can search fly fishing only. So FFO. Nope, it's just going to pull up things that have FFO in the name. What about if I type in this way? Nope. So this is only going to tell us names of bodies of water. I don't know if we have a specific fly fishing only map, but what I can tell you is that based on our law book, so remember we were talking about North Zone general law, South Zone general law. Typically in the North Zone, it is fly fishing only. So that's where you're going to find the majority of our fly fishing only waters, especially if it's a region that has trout and salmon. So for example, I believe like Grand Lake Stream is fly fishing only. That's a salmon fishery, but there's also lots of bass in there. So that's a great fly fishing only water. And then the Rangeley Lakes region is also fly fishing only because that's the headwaters of the Kennebago where the brook trout strain thrives. So definitely check up those laws every time. And this app is what I pull up, the online angling tool, because you can geolocate yourself with this little button here, or you can search the body of water you're going for. So typically, for example, this winter, my last ice fishing clinic was on Sebec Lake. I have never been there before. And so I wanted to know, knowing that it is in the North Zone, what can I have there? So we find Sebec Lake. We want the whole thing. So scroll through here, see how these say Badger Brook, Sebec Lake direct tributaries. We're looking for the entire lake. So somewhere here it's going to tell us the entire lake. So we scroll down through. These are telling us just the brooks that they're in. So this is the one we're looking for. Sebec Lake, the towns that it's in, and the regulated area, entire lake. So this is the one that we want. We're going to click on it. It'll zoom us into where that body of water is. And then we're going to have what I like about the Flow app over the law book is that it will tell you what the S codes stand for. So in the very beginning of our law book, which we're still going to cover the law book, we haven't gotten that far yet. There's 33 S codes, and the law book only gives you the S abbreviation with the body of water. In the Flow app, it will tell you what S2 is, closed to the taking of smelts except by hook and line. So one thing that I also know about the North Zone, so it is often fly fishing only, it is also no live bait typically. So at this particular body of water, it will allow us as 11, which means that the use or possession of live bait and smells is permitted. So that was particularly why I chose Sebec Lake this winter. I needed a North Zone ice fishing opportunity for the public, but we wanted to be able to use live bait fish. So this is a really fun app that I like to use. Are maybe close to 27 mud ponds in the state of Maine. The geolocate feature is really nice. A couple years ago, I was out fishing on otter ponds down in Standish, and there are several otter ponds in the chain. Thought I was on the right pond. Geolocate turns out I wasn't on the right pond, and that's why I was catching no fish. So definitely make sure that you are utilizing this app because it is phenomenal. So what I typically do is look up those laws and regulations, and then I'll screenshot it on my app so that I have it pulled up when I'm ready to go. The other thing I do on my phone is screenshot this very first page of the law book. So before we switch over to going over the law book and the laws and regulations, does anybody have any questions now about
Chelsea,
species?
um, Chelsea, I will jump in. There is a way to search fly fishing only bodies of water. If you go to IFNW's special fishing laws page, you can then search under special regulation and put FFO in, and that'll pull up only fly fishing only waters.
So
I didn't know how
searching,
to do it until we were on here, and I found it now.
so under the search means fishing laws.
If you go to the special fishing laws page,
Fishing laws. All right, let's go up here. We'll go under fishing. Is there a drop down? Where do we find the special fishing laws?
ooh, it's under fishing and boating.
Okay, back up to the top. So we'll click on this whole one and then scroll down. Hmm.
Um, I just Googled it and then was able to pop over, to be
Okay,
honest. So
I will look that up. Before I do that, I want to just point out these lake survey maps. We'll come back to that. I'll go do what we're doing. Let's my squirrel brain. So MDIFW special fishing laws. Under this one,
yes, that's the one.
perfect. And then you can search down here
Yep, under
under the
special
special.
regulation. Yeah.
There we go. Okay. So for our friend who asked about special fishing laws and the fly fishing only waters, yes. Gosh, I've learned a couple of things tonight. This is fantastic. So there's that resource. So before we talk about laws, I just want to finish up one more way since many of you are looking to on how to identify a fishing location or where to go fishing or how do you find those things. So we talked about the fishing report. Underneath fishing here, we also have the Maine fishing guide. That's one of those resources I didn't click on. It has an illustrated fish ID within. So you click on it. This is a PDF that you can download. We do not have it as a print version. But in here, it has those regions we were talking about. And the cool thing is it'll tell you all the towns that are in each region. And then even better, it will separate each region and tell you the bodies of water that are in there if we keep going down further into this section. So just to recap, it tells you the region, what towns are there, then it gives you how to catch specific fish and how to ID them. And then it will break down each region by recommended fishing locations by the specific species you are trying to target. So if you want to know where to go brook trout fishing in region A, which is Sebago Lakes region, it'll tell you. If you want to go landlocked salmon fishing, if you want to go pike fishing earlier when someone had asked about that, you can find all that here in the Maine fishing guide. This is one of those books that I've read cover to cover many a times while waiting for an ice fishing flag. It is also another book that I have read is our species guide on the website. Let me see here. I can go to ME Fish Wildlife. We go underneath our fishing section, and then underneath our species in Maine, these species specific information is another thing that used to be printed and you can read it cover to cover. So read each individual one and you'll learn everything you need to know about habitat, eating habits, and the different characteristics, as well as identification. color for fish is a terrible way to ID them, but their fins never move unless they get clipped or eaten or rubbed off, which is rare, but their fin placement never moves and their facial structure doesn't change. So those are ways that you can ID those fish if you get really good at um, reading this book cover to cover. This also has some tips on ice fishing, an identification page that goes in a little bit more in depth. And then at the very back, I believe it talks about ice fishing as well. I haven't read this new one yet, but it talks a little bit about why we have our two general fishing law zones, which we talked about. Talks about fishing with plastics. So our PSA to all of you on our day after Earth Day is if you are a bass fisherman or you are using those soft plastic lures, please remember to use a retention device or consider using one. Um, each and every cast is a potential for that soft plastic lure to end up in the water. And bass can regurgitate, but trout and salmon cannot. So when you have these soft plastic lures on the bottoms of our rivers, streams, lakes, and ponds, a trout will be going along. They're very curious. They like to pick up stones, and they'll actually pick up these soft plastic lures, and they cannot regurgitate them out of their systems. So if you can imagine a 6-foot brook trout, which is our average stocking size in the springtime, sucking up a soft plastic lure, it doesn't leave a lot of room in their stomach for extra food. So please make sure that you are doing your part to protect those fish species out there. My other PSA to you all is how to handle those fish species. So when you're out there, always remember to wet your hands before you touch them. Fish are covered in a slime coat, which actually makes them waterproof. So when they're fish swimming around out there in the water, they are not actually touching the water with their scales. It's covered by that slime coat. When you touch their slime coat with a dry hand, you remove that coat and it exposes them to the bacteria and pathogens that are in the water. So about 90+% of those fish that you remove the slime coat will die because they do not have the protection to keep those other things in the water away from them. So we want to make sure that we're wetting our hands. We recommend a rubber net over a cloth net if you're just picking up your fishing gear. It doesn't have to break the bank. My net is an $18 one off Amazon. It is rubber. I recommend smaller holes versus bigger holes, because when you catch those native brookies, they go right through the big holes. Um, that will tell you all that you need to know here in our law book. Further going into photographing responsibly, wetting your hands, be gentle. I often carry a pair of forceps on me, those little pliers that they use for surgeries. You can get them real cheap at Dax Bait and Tackle or your local fly shop. And the reason is those needle nose pliers you get for removing hooks or the hook moving tools, they can go down into a bass's mouth, which has a big working space, but a trout and salmon mouths are a lot smaller, so those tiny forceps work a little bit easier to get down. Also do a lot of fishing with barbless hooks. So you buy the hook and pinch down the barb. It does add an extra layer of challenge to fishing. You do lose more fish that way. But I am personally a catch and release kind of girl, unless I'm bringing it home to grandma. So I recommend thinking about what you're going to do with your catch before you go out there, and then fishing accordingly to those ethics of whether you're going to harvest that fish and kill it immediately, or if you're going to release it and want it to go on its way ethically. I think that's all I have for this one. And again, I'll make sure that I send you all of these links in an email, or Tanya will, more likely. Um, There's also an ice fishing guide in here, tells you everything you need to know. The bait fish and smelt retailers is a really great place for in the winter time. A lot of our bait fish dealers in Maine are cash only, or they're small mom and pop shops. So that's something that's really helpful to know. If you're into fishing derbies or you want to get into a derby, or like, what is that? Check out our fishing derbies page here. There are hundreds of thousands of them every year in Maine, both on the hard water and the open water, and they're all over the state with various levels of prizes and species to target, whether you are stream wading or bass tournaments on the biggest of lakes. there's something for everybody there. And we do have special wa opportunity waters and opportunities for folks with disabilities. There are many different resources for them. And if that is something that you are looking for in particular or have a question, please shoot me an email and I will make sure to get you the accessibility information. And there are some complimentary licenses for certain individuals. Questions now before we dive into the law book, before I hand it over to Laura.
Are there updated depth species maps available? Most of the maps found are about 30 years old.
The lake survey maps are very old, and no, there are no up-to-date ones except there is a book. The same company that does the Maine Gazetteer has a depth book that was updated 23 or 24, I believe. So try checking that one out. I can look for that link and send that over to you all as well. But that is the only one that I know that is decently up to date. One thing I will note on those lake survey maps is that they are never accurate because they were taken in the late 90s, early 2000s. But what it does for me is give me a good uh, guideline to start, right? So I know where the deep parts of the lake are. I know where the shorelines are. I know where the drop-offs or the sandbars. And then based on that, I can know what species I'm targeting. For example, those bass and sunfish, they're going to be in shallow areas. They're going to want structure and habitat. They're not going to be out there on a sandy beach. However, our brook trout may be on the sandy beach. Our rainbow trout may be on the sandy beach. So reading that Maine fishing guide will help give you some characteristics about habitat and feeding habits. And then you can start to identify where in the lake they may be. And that's a good resource that I do for ice fishing.
And does Maine have a walleye population? Walleye?
We do not have walleye in Maine. Nope. And we probably won't. Most states out west do walleye as the sport fish, but because we have a lot of native species here in Maine, we will not bring walleye because they're not native here. Great question.
I think that's all we have in the chat right now.
Okay. Prairies in here. Oh, perfect. The other question here, will we be just about exact lures per se, but in this book on the Maine fishing guide, it will tell you some specific tips on how to fish and what type. My recommendation is in Maine, I fish 365 days a year with kiddos and adults of all ages. Trout and salmon love worm on a bobber. That is your number one go-to. Even when you want to flip that perfect new lure that you bought, most of the time they're going to want a worm and bobber, especially in the springtime. So knowing about the fish and how they utilize their habitats here in Maine will allow you to know what kinds of lures to use during each time of year. So think in the summertime, it's really hot. Those cold water species are not going to be biting. So you have to tempt them with something that's really worth their energy. So in fishing, we talk about, what's their caloric intake? How much energy are they spending for the amount that they're taking in? Some of those trout and salmon in the rivers are going to be eating hundreds of nymphs every single day, thousands of them. If you give them one shiner, that's going to give, or smelt, that's going to provide them more protein and caloric value than those little nymphs that they're eating. So, what is their favorite kind of food? What type of season is it? Is it early season where they're just getting to eat those bugs, or is it fall where they're starting to stock up for spawning? If they're getting ready for that spawn. And when I say stocking, I mean the bulk for winter. They're bulking up for winter. Or is it next to spawning season where they're not having an appetite at all? All they care about are ladies. So the only one you're going to get are those female broodstocks that maybe are hungry. And how are you going to entice them with something that they don't usually see or that they haven't seen all summer long? So knowing what season and how you're fishing will affect the type of lures that you're using. And same with warm water species are going to be totally different than your cold water species and what you're using for them. But shiny is a really good way to get any fish. And fish see in pastels. So the brighter, the better. When we look at things and we're like, oh, that's really colorful or that's really pretty, what you really should be looking at is what is that reflection going to be on the water? So when fish are looking up, their eyes are either faced so that they're looking straight out or they're looking up. Trout and salmon are looking for the predators. The bass and all of those other warm water species are just looking in the water column as a whole for their food source. So what's going to catch their attention? And then what colors stand out the most? We are looking down on the glare, but they're looking up at the bright sun. So what's going to contrast against that light on the surface of the water? Or are you fishing beneath the surface to catch their attention? So a lot of bright colors or lots of dark colors. White is not as successful as you might think, unless you're fly fishing. And then fly fishermen will tell you different, but it's the way that you're fishing that color or that pattern that changes it. And unfortunately, I am not the expert on that. I am an introductory to outdoor skills. But I hope that gives you a little bit more information. And inside this main fishing guide, there is some more specific on what to use for each species and during what season. And sometimes they put that in the main fishing, the monthly fishing report as well. Great questions.
And if,
So,
oh,
good.
if using boating free marine navigation charts is a great tool. Oh, that's a comment. The
Yep.
free marine, yep. And are there any daily bag limits in the regulations or size limits?
Yes, let's move on over to our law book and we're going to talk all about it. So this is page 3 of the fishing law book. So it changes every single year. And this is still 2025 on our website, Tanya. Let's see if I can find us a new one. 2026. Perfect. All right, we'll get rid of the other one and we'll just use this one. The 2026 law books. Down to page 3. I screenshot this every January and keep it in my phone as a favorite. The general fishing laws for inland fish and wildlife are gonna stay the same for the North and the South Zone 365 days a year. So from January 1 until December 31st, the general laws will not change. However, every year we change the laws and regulations to specific bodies of water. And then we may also change the seasons or the bag limits or the size limits. So each year you must re-educate yourself on this particular page, which is always page 3 of the law book. This is also the page that folds out if you have a physical copy of the law book. And on here, I love how it is broken down. So on the very top, it talks about the terminal gear. So terminal gear is talking about the type of bait that you're allowed to have. So North Zone, the use or possession of live bait is prohibited everywhere unless otherwise stated. Like when we looked at Sebec Lake and it said S11, I believe is the code. Yes. For the South Zone, use of all legal bait forms is permitted. So you can use any kind of bait. The one thing that I did not talk about in the fishing guide, but it is also in the law book, is there is a page on legal bait fish. So let's look here. Oh, oh, there's a lot here. I love the Control F feature. So in the very back of our book here, there is a whole page on the different types of bait fish you are allowed to have. Typically, the only things you're allowed to have are rainbow smelts. Those are the smelts that you can get at the bait shop, or are what we call shiners. So they're typically the common shiner or redfin shiner, golden shiner. There are many different subspecies to the common shiner. Those are the two most common smelts and shiners that you will find. You'll also see chubs. You'll also see suckers. Um, but for the most part, these are the ones that you are going to see, and they are the only ones you are allowed. We do not allow any spiny dorsal fish. So if the top fin, this dorsal fin, the top one up top here, if that has spines in it, or you feel like you might get stabbed by it, not a legal bait fish. You also cannot catch any species in Maine. So, say you're out there fishing and you catch yellow perch. You cannot use that as bait for another fish or a different type of fish. If you're catching a sunfish, you cannot use that as bait to catch a bass. It has to be a legal bait fish or a lure. Okay, so very important. Back up here to our page 3. So there's different seasons for North Zone and South Zone, and there's different seasons for lakes and ponds versus rivers and streams and brooks. What is the difference between the three? Google it. I combine them. We've got lakes and ponds, and we've got rivers, streams, and brooks. That's all I need to know when it comes to laws and regulations. From April 1st to September 30th in the North Zone, it is open to open water fishing. And from October 1st to March 31st, it is closed to all fishing unless otherwise specified. In the past 4 years, we have opened up different bodies of water in the North Zone for ice fishing, and it will say it in the S codes, which open to ice fishing is mm, well, I thought it was an S code here. It will say it specifically in the special season codes. If it says CI, it means closed for ice fishing. And then Sebec Lake was an example that said it's open for ice fishing in the description. It will tell you clear as day if you're allowed to ice fish in the North Zone. That's all you need to know. In the rivers and streams, they are closed from October 1st to South Zone, they are closed. From April 1st to August 15th, it is open to open water fishing. However, once August 16th hits, you cannot use worms or live bait. It must be artificial lures or fly fishing only at that time. And that's because that's the prep, that's the bulking before their spawning season. Trout and salmon spawn in, particularly trout, in October-ish. So we want to give them a little bit less pressure on the fishing season by limiting what kinds of lures you can use. Species. We have the cold water species first. Those are typically our natives, and then our species below that are not what we would consider a game fish. And those all have different daily bag limits and possession limits. So the difference is a daily bag limit is how many you can get when you're out on the water, and your possession limit is how many you can have in the freezer. Okay. So if you catch, you're allowed your 2 fish per day. You're also only allowed to have 2 fish in the freezer if it's from the daily bag possession limit. So we don't have separate ones. They are one and the same. However, if you catch your 5 brook trout in one day and you eat 2 of them for dinner, you have 3 left, then you can go and catch 2 more the next day. So keep that in mind as your daily bag limit and possession limit. When you take them home and you have them in your freezer, they must be properly labeled with the date as well, so that should a game warden ever need to go through, it is properly labeled. You will get in trouble if you don't have those labeled. The minimum inches for each species is listed, and they are all different. They're not the same, so that makes it used to be just a 6-inch minimum, but now each species has their own. So please be aware of that. And then our bag limits on bass have changed. So in the North Zone, they're not native, so you can have as many bass as you want. In the South Zone, there's only two fish because we manage them as a game or sport fish. So we don't want to overharvest those bass in the South Zone. In the North Zone, we do not care. Please take them out. Now, the state, a common thread we hear amongst the fishing community is if it is a lesser desired species to take it out and throw it on the bank. We want to talk about ethics of fishing. So if you're out there fishing and you catch 32 yellow perch and you leave them on the shore, does that leave a good message to our future fishermen or standby folks who are just coming to enjoy the lake? We do not, as an agency, want you throwing fish out if you're not going to eat it. So, yes, we are managing our fish species for those invasives versus non-natives and native fish, but we do not want you just taking the fish out and leaving them. That primarily comes into play during ice fishing season when folks will leave them on the ice. Less of a scenario because our eagles and uh, other land species will come and clean those up. But again, let's think about everyone else using the landscape. The special clause and codes, we won't go through all 33 of them, but please feel free to take a look and get familiar with them. Again, I like the Float app because it will tell you each S code within the body of water that you're fishing. Some important ones to know, though, are the season codes. So season A means it's open to ice fishing and open water fishing from January 1st to December 31st. That's typically most bodies of water in the southern half of the state, the South Zone. And then B is open to ice fishing and open water fishing from January 1st to April 30th. And CI is closed to ice fishing. CO is closed to open water fishing from October 1st to March 31st. So that will happen in the CI, and CO typically happen in the North Zone. Any questions on that? There was a lot of information there.
Do you need to list the location of where it was caught too?
No, but not a bad idea if you have attention to detail like myself.
And is there a way to order a paper copy or book of the inland fishing laws publication?
Absolutely. You can email me your address or you can call 287-8000 and Angel or Colleen would be more than happy to email or mail you a physical copy of the law book.
And we have another question about whether or not we're talking about saltwater fishing. Could you?
In this session, we're not going to talk about saltwater fishing. However, because that's not my specialty. I don't do saltwater fishing, and that's not a responsibility of inland fisheries and wildlife. So I would not consider myself an expert on that topic. What I would recommend you do is check out the saltwater recreational fishing regulation and tips. Put that link in the chat feature as well. They have their own laws and regulations. One difference that I'll point out is that through inland fish and wildlife, you must have a fishing license for our bodies of water. And for saltwater fishing, you do not need a license. However, the Coast Guard does prefer you to register. If you buy an inland fisheries and wildlife fishing license, you can add on the salt water free of charge. If you do just the DMR through their website, I believe it costs $1 or whatever the processing fee is at this time. And that's just so that the Coast Guard knows that you're using water. All they really want to know is who is out there and what are they doing. They don't manage their marine fishery for recreational fishing the same way that we do inland waters. They are primarily focused on commercial fishing. With that being said, they're pretty strict on striped bass regulations, though. So please familiarize yourself with this little top link under the printable summaries and recreational fishing regulations. These four little bullet points are going to be most of the information that you're going to need to know about recreational saltwater fishing. And if you have further questions, please let me know and I can connect you with the right person. But this page is your best starting point, and the best that I can give you for a resource as far as saltwater goes.
And besides Presumscott near Route 35, are there any fly fishing only rivers or streams in southern Maine?
The Crooked River is definitely fly fishing only. I know that one because it's in my backyard, but let's take a look here. Special fishing regulations. Doesn't go here. And where was that supposed to be? You said in southern Maine?
Southern
So.
Maine.
All right. So the Crooked River is 100%. The Duck Trap River is in Waldo. Grand Lake Stream in Washington County is phenomenal fishing, fly fishing only. Um, the Narraguagus River has lots of sea run salmon, so beware. You cannot fish for sea run Atlantic salmon in the state of Maine. So if you catch a sea run salmon, you have to cut the line. You cannot remove that fish from the water. The Scotts River you know about, and that's it for rivers. The rest are ponds in southern Maine. But the special fishing laws that we Googled is a really great resource. Laura, I'm super excited that you found this.
And are there any specific permits required for trout location or season?
I don't know how to answer that question. There are specific laws as far as how many you can keep and how long they need to be. So there's length in how many restrictions, but as far as where you are fishing for them, other than reading a specific body of water that you're fishing, we don't necessarily restrict a species to a region. We put the specific regulations for the specific body of water, if that makes sense. Whomever has that question, please feel free to either
Some
put a follow-up or,
they're saying that because some states have trout stamps, but we don't have
oh,
trout
no,
stamps.
we don't have a trout. Only stamp you have to get in Maine is your duck stamp for waterfowl.
And is there a central place to check water flow data?
That is a good question. Maine water flows. Somebody found a website the other day, but I was unsure. I know LL Bean posts them. Water flow data. Um, let's see here. Do some on the spot Googling. I know that LL Bean posts their water flows um for all of the popular fly fishing and fishing rivers. You can always call LL Bean at any time and ask to talk to the fishing department and they can tell you that. Um, but it looks like this website is the waterdata.usgs.gov. So this is a federal website. It looks like this has it. I don't know much about it because I've literally just Googled it with you all. But it seems to be pretty accurate. It's telling us that the Androscoggin River is below normal, at 9,000 as an output. Um, has a lot of our other ones here. I can share this link in the chat so you all can play around with it. Let's see what other one was here. This one looks like a well, like the wells, not the flows. This one says no data, so don't click on that one. I would think that that one that I just sent you looks like our best option for river flows. Looks like there's a GIS story map here too. This is another one, river reports. I don't know anything about it, but I'll put that chat down there as well. Do I know we saw very few striper last year? Um, I don't know the specifics to it. I know you're not the first person to ask that question. Susan Dino is a longtime striper angler out of Southern Maine, and she would be a fabulous resource to reach out to for more information on that. Um, Based on my experience with fish, is that weather and the uh, changing of our water systems, flows, the temperature, the overall weather conditions that the United States experienced probably had an effect on that. But I don't know how the population is doing, and I don't know a lot about stripers, so I can't speak to their population as a whole, why we may have seen a decline in Maine's population. I do believe that I heard that the populations didn't make it as far north was pretty short. So the population was on average in southern states from us, but in Maine we did see less of them, maybe because they just didn't make it this high. As to why, I don't know the answer to that question. I love all these questions. Well, with that being said, that's about all I have for these. The one last thing I'll say about the law book is just get yourself familiarized with it. Um, Read through it. There's so much information that IFNW has that I can admit to myself that I have definitely not read all of it. I'm learning new things as we chat tonight, so there's always new things to learn and see. And the law book, if you have never used it before, does have our laws, but it also has definitions in here. It has some basic information on the first few pages about different things you might have seen in other states versus what you do. It does also say here, someone asked about the 10-acre ponds and access if it is posted. Um, It says that all ponds of 10 acres or less, whether the pond is natural or artificial, formed on rivers, streams, or brooks, are governed by the same fishing laws that apply to the river, stream, or brook where the pond is situated. This does not apply to private ponds licensed as a free fishing pond. And if a lake or pond is in the alphabetical water body list of the special fishing laws section, then the lake or pond general and special laws apply. So what that means is that when you're using float or the law book, if the body of water is not listed, so you're looking up Lake Penissiwasi, Norway Lake, that's my local pond here, and it is not in the law book, which it actually is, then their general law would apply. So if you are looking and you can't find it in the law book, it just refer back to general laws for whether you're in North Zone or South Zone. And that's what it's saying for the 10-acre ponds as well. It doesn't say anything about access to it though. So I'm not sure. If you want more information, I can get you in contact with a game warden who would know the specifics. All right, that's enough from me. If you have more questions, please put them in the chat box, but I am going to open up the slideshow and hand it over to Laura.
Awesome, Chelsea. That was so much, but so useful. Great job. So I want to talk to you all today about understanding Maine's lead tackle law. Lead tackle is obviously not good for wildlife. It's especially not great for the loons. So we'll get into it. So loons, Maine. I'll start with some fun facts about loons. Their wingspan is 46 inches and their bodies are 32 inches in length. They weigh about 9 pounds. Males can weigh up to 15 pounds. To put that in perspective, loons weigh as much as bald eagles do, although bald eagles have nearly double the wingspan. Another fun fact about loons, they need a quarter mile of open water to take flight. That is a really long distance for them to get up off of the water. And then once they're flying, they can fly up to 90 miles per hour. They can also dive up to 200 feet deep. So they're a pretty impressive bird. We see them all over the state of Maine. They're on our license plates. We use them to advertise for businesses. Um, this last year, our loon count showed that there's an estimated just about 3,200 adults in, the southern Maine part of the state. The 45th parallel is kind of a line from Rangeley to Calais. We know there's more loons up north. We just don't have good coverage on those lakes and ponds to help estimate that total. The loons are a really good indicator of healthy freshwater habitat because they swim underwater to hunt for their food. They need really good water systems, clear water to see those fish as they're swimming. And they help us boost our economy here in Maine. So why are we talking about loons and talking about fishing? Loons can get lead poisoning from lost fishing tackle. There's two ways that they pick up that tackle. It's either that your line is broken off and a piece of your tackle is left in a fish and a loon decides to eat that fish. Or similar to, your backyard chickens, they actually dive down to the bottom of the lake to pick up rocks to help aid in their digestion. So that goes in the gizzard and rolls around. Once they pick up a piece of lead tackle, it takes about 2 to 3 weeks for them to start showing signs of lead poisoning. And by the time us humans can see those signs, they're likely going to die from lead poisoning. It's really hard to reverse it in loons because of their digestion system. And it's a really easy thing for us to kind of switch out of our tackle box and just be mindful of to help them survive. And so we do see a slight increase in lead poisoning loons during peak fishing season. That's during like July, August, when everyone's out of school and out on those lakes fishing. So it's not just this old stockpile of lead sitting on lake bottoms. We suspect that more so it's broken offline and people are still using lead tackle that's left in a fish and then getting consumed by a loon. So Maine has had a lead tackle law for a while now. The first law passed in 2002, and that just restricted small sized split shot and sinkers. That was one of the big things we were seeing in deceased loons that died of lead poisoning. The most recent law update was made in 2023, and it's starting to phase out those painted lead jig heads. So as it stands right now, Maine prohibits the sale and use of sinkers and unpainted lead jigs weighing 1 ounce or less or measuring 2.5 inches or less in length. They currently just started prohibiting the sale of painted lead jigs within that size range. And starting this September, you won't be able to use painted lead jigs 1 ounce or less in weight or 2.5 inches in length or less. And that's because that's the typical size that we see in deceased loons that die of lead poisoning. And the addition of the painted lead jig is that paint in no way protects the loon from the lead that is inside that tackle. A master's student out of New Hampshire did a study, and within a couple days, that paint chips off of that lead jig head, and then the lead is still inside of the loon. It can't pass that. It can't regurgitate it, and so that lead just sits in there and leaches out and causes lead poisoning. So, what exactly is a lead sinker? A lead sinker is a device that contains lead, and it's designed to be attached to your fishing line to sink the line. This does not include artificial lures, ice fishing sounders, weighted line, weighted flies, or jig heads. But we do have the law around the jig head as well. So what is a lead jig? That's a hook with a lead weight molded to it, regardless of if it's painted, coated, or covered by some other substance or attached skirt. And this does not include a pretty big list of items. You can still use lead core line, spinner baits, buzz baits, spoons, poppers, plugs, or flies. I do recommend switching all of your tackle to lead free. It's not only sinkers and jig heads that we find in deceased loons. That's just the higher number of lead tackle that we see in loons, but it's not to say that they're not going to swallow your popper that has, a little bit of lead in it, and then that still gives them lead poisoning. And so this is just a visual example of what you can't use in Maine currently for lead tackle. And on the left there, those painted jigs, you can still use those this summer, but starting September 1st this year, you will no longer be able to use those. And just to be even as clear as possible on the exceptions, because the whole point is to understand and know the law. Saltwater fishing, as Chelsea mentioned, Inland Fisheries and Wildlife does not regulate saltwater fishing. And so when you're out on the ocean, you can use anything lead while you're out there. Most of the time, that's going to be bigger tackle anyway that we're not going to see loons pick up. You can still use sinkers and jigs that weigh over 1 ounce or longer than 2.5 inches. As I said, I'd prefer everyone to switch fully lead free and have a tackle box with no lead in it. When you're purchasing your tackle, I just say to be mindful of the labeling. There is still a lot of lead tackle you can buy throughout the state in those larger sizes. And then, yes, this does not include that lead core trolling line, your ice fishing sounders. There is no lead-free option for that, but maybe one day there will be. Spinner baits, buzz baits, spoons, poppers, plugs, or flies. And IFNW has this great chart on their website. If you look up their lead tackle law, it goes into detail, those definitions, really spells it out clearly, what you can and can't use, and then shows you that starting September 1st this year, you won't be able to use those painted jigs anymore. The upside is it is working. When we first started tracking loons and lead poisoning in Maine, it was the leading cause of death for collected deceased loons. Now it's down to the number 3 cause. I will say, sadly, the first cause right now is blunt force trauma, and that's typically from boat strikes. So that's another thing us as anglers and boaters can be aware of is slow down around loons, pay attention to where you're going, give them the space they need. And I've been doing outreach around this for the last 4 years or so, and I find there's a lot more awareness throughout the angling community about lead and the negative effects, and a lot more people are willing to use lead-free tackle. Those alternatives are also now a lot more cost comparative and pretty widely available. So if you have lead tackle, where can you recycle it? Because you can't really get rid of it. You don't want to just bring it to the dump and have it sit in landfill. That's not great either. So you can drop it to us at Maine Audubon, either of our nature centers in Falmouth and Holden, or the IFNW offices across the state will collect it as well. And then I take all of that to Radius Recycling in Portland, and they recycle it responsibly so it doesn't end up in someone else's tackle box. There are certain transfer stations around Maine that you can take it to, but I do recommend looking into where they recycle it and where it ends up before bringing it there. So since 2020, we've been tracking the amount of lead tackle we've collected, and as of 2025, we had collected 689 pounds of lead tackle, which, if you're thinking about those small little half-ounce split shots and jig heads, that is a ton of fishing tackle. And many potential loon lives saved, because that tackle isn't out there for them to ingest. And just this past spring, I was at the sportsman shows and we were able to get another 95 pounds between Augusta and Orono. So there's still tackle out there and we're still doing the work to collect it. And so what can you do? The biggest thing you can do is make sure your tackle box doesn't have any of that restricted lead tackle. Um, as I said, I'd love for everyone to have a tackle box just full of all lead-free tackle, but I understand there's certain items that you'll still have in there, and that's okay. Just, be aware when you're using that stuff and make sure you're trying to be as safe with it as possible. Make sure to recycle your old tackle. As I said, you can bring it to us at Maine Audubon and I'll take care of it for you. And also purchase lead-free alternatives. A lot of websites will restrict the sale of lead tackle to Maine and states that have these lead laws. That being said, Amazon is not one of those sites. So if you're doing a bulk tackle order from Amazon, you really need to look into what that tackle is made of. And if it doesn't scream lead free, it likely has lead in it. So make sure to do your research when you're purchasing new tackle. Also, encourage your friends and families to fish lead free and let them know how dangerous lead can be for loons. And even though flies are still okay to be lead, try to use lead-free wire when you're tying flies. They have tungsten heads for your weighted flies now. So there's options out there, and just try to be as conscious as you can. Some other ways you can help loons in Maine, the no wake law within 200 feet of shore, that really helps loons out. They're such an awkward bird. Their feet are set so far back on their body that when they nest on the shoreline, they can't get that far up. And so any big wakes that come by will wash their eggs out and then they have to re-nest again. So just being aware of that. Same with wake surfing activity. When you're out on those wake surfing boats, they throw a pretty big wake. So you need to be 300 feet from shore for that. Also, fishing line can be a big issue. If you get your line caught in a tree, try your best to get it out. And just make sure you're disposing of that line properly. Not just for loons, but for all wildlife. I've seen some birds caught up in that, and it's not a pretty sight. I also always recommend reeling in if you're fishing nearby loons. I've heard some horror stories of loons actually chasing after fish on people's lines and dragging them around in their kayaks. So just be aware that loons have kind of keyed into anglers as a source of food. And so just be aware of your surroundings when you're out there. Not saying that a loon is going to come attack you, but just be mindful as you're fishing. And then you can also join our annual loon count. We do that the third Saturday in July every year. It's from 7 a.m. to 7:30 a.m. And that is how we get that population estimate that I talked about at the beginning.
I think that's it, Laura.
Okay, and if that is my last slide, I will a slight plug in for the fact that I will be at Kittery Training Post this Saturday doing a lead tackle exchange. So if anyone wants to come down and drop off their lead tackle, you'll get a $10 gift card to spend at Kittery Training Post.
That's fantastic. Laura, how do they tell if their tackle is lead or not?
Yeah, so some ways to know if it's lead. Anything that's old, anything you got from your dad or your grandfather is likely gonna be lead tackle. It's also very like dusty and kind of older looking. The new alternatives are really shiny. And it's very soft. You can dent it with your fingernails, or if you remember biting split shot on and seeing your little tooth marks in it. But the biggest way is if you use a magnet. Lead tackle is not magnetic, whereas all other tackle will be. Any other questions out there?
Do you have a favorite lead-free tackle resource, Laura? I know that you have a couple of out-of-state retailers that
Yes, I have a couple out of state retailers that I really like. There's Glasswater Angling out of Kansas. His whole site is lead free. He makes or finds you just about anything. He's a really great guy to work with. If you can't find something, he can help you find it. And then there's also, oh, I'm blanking on the name. There's another company out of Massachusetts that makes some really great lead-free digs, and I'll find the name and make sure Chelsea sends it out to you all in the email.
that's perfect. Paul, if you are anywhere near Kittery Trading Post, I recommend going down to see Laura this weekend. If not, you can come into any IF&W headquarters, and I am sure the someone in that office would be happy to go through your tackle box with you.
Awesome. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Um, Enoch, I see your question. Is there a way to search for wild brook trout in southern zone on the filter that we were previous? I don't know if we advertise per se where our wild brook trout are. So I will share with you all my key indicators that I'm looking for when I'm fishing on how to tell if that fish is a native or if it is a hatchery fish. So when you are out there fishing in your streams, rivers, ponds, lakes, etc., if it is under 6 inches, I can almost guarantee you that is a wild brook trout. So when you are fishing in the south or the north zone, primarily in the small river streams and brooks, if you're catching little guys on a fly rod or fishing rod, those are native brook trout. And you can typically tell with their par marks on the side. They look so vibrant and regal. And I'm not saying that because I love brook trout. They really do have a different look to them at that age. If they're above 6 inches, the state will stock between 6 and 18-inch trout. It depends on whether it was hatched in January and it is going out as a spring stock. If we have held it from the hatch and keep it to the fall, and then that becomes about a 12-inch stocking. So spring is 6, fall is a little bit bigger, 8 to 12. And then we also release our brood stock. So our hatchery fish are on a 4 to 5 year rotation. So after their 5th year of reproducing in our brood stock, we will release that brood stock to the wild and use the next generation of stock in our hatcheries. So you'll get some of those what we call the footballs. Now, you can tell because if you catch one of those footballs in southern Maine, most likely it is not native. They do not get that big here in southern Maine. Now, if you go towards Rangeley North, following the western and the northern part of the state, you can find native brook trout that size here in our state. And we don't really stock much past the Bangor region. So if you're catching anything north of Bangor, it's probably wild or has been. I don't think that we stock there. You could check the stocking report just to fact me. I don't believe we stock much above Bangor. With that being said, you can often tell some of there's also different stages, right? So a stocked fish, for example, on um, the Horns, which is in the Bigelow Mountain Preserve, or the top of Tumbledown Mountain. Those are stocked fish, but when they are fry. So fry are right after the egg hatch, and they still have their eggs. They're just after they've lost their egg sacs. Then we will put those fry out into the wild, and they grow from fry to adulthood. And in those particular two bodies of water, nobody hikes 4 miles with a fly rod. So you can go there and catch stocked, but mostly native brook trout in those regions. Um, or I would say wild. They're very wild, but they're not native per se. So
Can I ask a follow-up question?
of course, absolutely.
Okay. Yeah. I understand it's maybe wise not to advertise where the brook trout are in southern Maine, but maybe another way of asking the question is, in southern Maine, is it generally productive to do blue lining, which is the just the look on these little narrow blue streams and brooks and tributaries and try them for brook trout, or do you think that's like likely to be unproductive given we're in the south?
You could call the Gray headquarters and talk to Jim Pellerin, and he would tell you everything you want to know about native brook trout in southern Maine. Very, very few. Most of our fish in the southern half are all stocked, especially brook trout. And that's because of human encroachment on their habitat, on water quality conditions, on predatory species. Most of those trout and salmon you're catching, our salmon are different. We do have a native wild population of landlocked salmon that reproduce in the Sebago Lakes, Crooked River region. But as far as brook trout, I don't know of any wild or native brook trout species in the southern half of the state um, at all. And I grew up in Western Maine.
It sounds like anything that is put in is unlikely to hold over in southern Maine too, based on what you said earlier.
Yes,
Yeah.
that is
Okay.
correct.
All right.
We call that a
Thanks.
put and take fishery. You're welcome.
Yeah.
Now, the opposite can be said. We do have small populations of sea run brook trout, and you can find those in the mouths of all of the large rivers, Narraguagus, Piscataquis, Sheepskit, Kennebec, Androscoggin, the Narrows, the Denny's. Wherever you can find the Atlantic salmon, the sea run Atlantic salmon, you'll find sea run brook trout populations too.
Okay. And those are fine to catch because they're coming from the streams into the ocean as opposed to the salmon going from the ocean up the river. Is that right?
Yes, give or take.
Right. Okay. Thanks.
You're welcome. This is another opportunity for anyone on here. If you have a question, please feel free to unmute yourself. Laura and I have given you all of our fun information, and we can continue to answer questions or go back to a piece of information that we shared with you. I'm just going to keep scrolling through the comments here to see if I missed anything.
I've got one for you, Chelsea.
Sure.
Um, do you ever find uh, if you've stocked fish that they reproduce? For example, I live in the summer on a pond that's stocked with brown trout and brook trout in
Mhm.
Oxford County, and I mean, I don't believe there's any reproduction going on right now. There's not great spawning grounds, but are there? I have heard of a couple of cases actually where they find that all of a sudden the trout are spawning again. Does that happen much?
It To answer your question, it doesn't happen much, but it does occur, yes.
Yeah.
And primarily where there is still good habitat. You can find some of it. I mean, the crooked is probably some of the best. The Presumpscot, some of the best still decent habitat in southern Maine where we're finding some of these native wild populations, but there's not a lot of it. And again, for anyone who wants to talk fisheries, Jim Pellerin out of the Gray headquarter office loves talking to people. And even better, he'll give you a job if you want to go and volunteer and collect fish data while you're out there fishing. It's one of the things where our staff can only focus on certain bodies of water each year. So they're kind of on a rotating cycle. So there's 3 to 4 biologists per region. And as you can imagine, some of those regions have more bodies of water than others. And those biologists are the specialists for their section. So wherever you live in your region, find out where your regional headquarters is and talk to those biologists. They love talking to the public and they don't often get that opportunity. Yes, I absolutely can. Pellerin, Gray, HQ. Yeah. And Jim has been there for a long time. So he knows Southern Maine like the back of his hand. Um, I forgot my original question here. Yes, fish do repopulate once we stock them, but not very often. We're starting to notice that in some of like our mid-Maine regions. So not super far south, not super far north, but in that middle tier of water. What else?
I had one kind of interesting observation also, Chelsea. I live on a 100-acre pond, and then it flows into a much larger lake, the outlet. And in the larger lake, they stock with rainbows. And I've been fishing the smaller pond for 30, 40 years and caught browns and brookies. And one year I started picking up rainbows in the smaller pond. And I I talked to Jim, and he hypothesized that they're just coming up the stream from the big lake, and I couldn't believe it because they would have to jump like 5 feet. And
It
he
is
says,
not unheard of.
yeah, he said, yeah, rainbows can do that. So
Yeah, they
so
can.
funny things happen after decades, you know.
Anybody know where rainbows and brown trout are from? Or if they're
They're,
native or non-native to the United States?
they're German, right?
Some of them are German. Yep.
Rainbows are west of the Mississippi.
Even before that, they are all from Europe,
Hmm.
all of them. Back when the settlers started coming over, that was the gift of choice from England. They brought brook trout or brown trout and rainbow trout to every other continent than Europe. It started in Europe, though. Yeah, fun stuff. Um, a question about the fly fishing only rivers in southern Maine. Below the dam on the Royal River in Yarmouth is fly fishing only. Tell me more about that question. What are you looking for, Neil? Or was
I
that answering someone?
I just know someone that asked earlier about fly
Yeah,
fishing.
that was me.
Perfect.
Yeah,
Yeah,
That was
thanks.
one I just dawned on me. So
awesome.
It,
Awesome.
it's curious it didn't come up on the web search then. You put FFO and it would have lit up, right?
Yes, however, I will admit there are some technology challenges. So, I would, yeah, I don't have a good answer as to how to find those ones that slip through the cracks.
Mhm.
Looking for other questions that I might see here that I might have missed. Tanya, this might be a question for you, or maybe Laura, you have some answers here. Any of the online or printed resources about bodies of water reported include information about known or reported hazards? For that question, are we talking about hazards that humans have caused or hazards regarding intake of fish from that body of water? I think this is Jeffrey. I don't know if he's still on here. The answer to is there anything about hazards? Yes, in the law book and on our website, we do have a mercury recommendation. It's in the back of the law book. And there's also a PFAS advisory for some of I believe it is the link, no, Clinton, Fairfield, Benton area. I believe it extended down into Unity, possibly Thorndike and Benton. Um, and PFAS came into the fields with sludge from the mills. The sludge from the mills was on the farm crops. The deer ate it. And so there was the first an advisory for the deer. There's also advisory for the turkeys. But what we know about PFAS is it is forever. So once it's in the ecosystem, it is in those species. So It has likely made its way into the water, but we have not tested for fish. So it is an advisory that there is acknowledgement of PFAS in the area. So um, that is all I have for information on that one. Congrats on hooking a football in the Scott. It's great fishing. I take a group of kids from Wyndham there every year.
Since we mentioned the Presumpscot, Chelsea, do you know where the water transitions from able to support trout in season versus warm water only?
Do not know the answer to that.
Mhm.
Um, I have heard people reference Dundee Park in Wyndham, a little bit of a turning point. I know I fish for warm water species in Wyndham. So I would say definitely south of that is going to be warm water, but you can find trout species there. They're just much harder to get to north of that. But I don't know exactly where on there. That's really my only experience fishing there, though I've heard it's really great everywhere.
Thanks.
Yes, we will send out the recording after this. It may not be until next week since it is Thursday. But Tanya and I will get together and I'll include the link to this recording as well as the link to all of the resources that we've mentioned today. There is one thing that, I realized I skipped right over. I think I mentioned it briefly in the very beginning, but this program is part of our Next Step series of programming. Um, we offer our traditional safety courses like hunter safety, boater safety, etc. But we also offer next steps where when you buy your license, where do you go? Whether that's fishing, hunting, trapping, um, recreating, outdoor skills in general. And my role is to help provide opportunities for those options. And so you can find all that through our website. For those of you who are still here, and since this recording is going around, I will share on our website here that when you go to let's go here to our mufishwildlife.com and you scroll over here to the programs and resources tab. If you go underneath our educational programs, there's a little button here for upcoming workshops and programs, and we post every Friday new programs all over the state covering every topic. And these are topics that come up from our uh, sessions like this, as well as our polls that we put out in the beginning of this webinar, as well as feedback from our participants at our programs and workshops. So this one, like I said in the beginning, exploring Maine's fishing opportunities came from folks who had done a previous fishing workshop. We offer fly fishing, fly tying, and spin casting. In the wintertime, I offer ice fishing workshops. You don't have to have anything but a fishing license and proper clothing, and we provide all of the equipment. So every Friday, you can see these on our website. And if you're subscribed to our email, you will get those in that email as well. Sometimes we send them to our subscribers or previous participants first. So now that you have all been here, you will be the first to know when we have upcoming opportunities. Happy fishing, tight lines. Thank you all for joining us on a Thursday evening.